Hello and welcome to the Compass Conversations at Butler University podcast, where we talk about meaning and purpose at Butler and beyond. Enjoy the journey.
Welcome to Compass Conversations, a podcast series with the Compass Center, formerly known as the Center for Faith and Vocation at Butler University. In this series, I chat with Butler University alumni about their career journeys of meaning and purpose, highlighting the important work they are doing in the world. I'm Julie Diltz, and I'm a Butler alumna and Butler volunteer. I feel most aligned with my purpose and values when I'm connecting with people, learning new things, and contributing to the thriving of others. In this final episode of Series 2, I speak with Stacie Colston Patterson, a Butler alumna and attorney with a heart for justice that inspires her to help others tell their stories in a meaningful way. From working in legal aid to her current position with the YMCA, she helps open doors for others that have historically lacked. I know that you will be inspired by Stacie. Thanks for joining us. Hi, Stacie. Welcome to Compass Conversations. I'm super excited that you have agreed to take some time and chat with me. We're going to talk about meaning and purpose in your life, maybe how it's evolved over the years, and how it shows up in your work. So I'm excited for the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's great.
Absolutely. First, let's have you introduce yourself. Tell us what you're doing professionally today.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Stacie Colston Patterson. I am a 2004 grad from Butler University, and currently I work as legal counsel for the YMCA of Metropolitan Chicago. And as we'll learn a little bit more as we talk today, what I really feel like I do is I have this amazing opportunity to help people put these amazing ideas and fun partnerships that they have developed or thought of down on paper, essentially. So helping them kind of be successful in their course of work.
Awesome. And then tell us just about yourself personally, where you live, who your important people are, how you have fun, that sort of thing.
So I am still living in Indianapolis. Gotta love some remote work. And I am happily married and I have two kids. They are 10 and 7, and they are just hilarious, funny humans. And my mom actually moved to Indianapolis to be closer to her grandkids. She'll say it's me. It's not me. It's to be closer to her grandkids. So those are really the sort of, like, I would say, like, family important people to me. But as an only child from a single parent home, I have had the joy of being able to sort of choose my family most of my life. And that's just been a part of my just like building friendships. And so I have some amazing friends that have actually never lived where I lived, because I went to and worked at the same residential summer camp for 15 years. So
that's amazing.
So I am very good at helping people understand how to maintain those friendships. Like when I talk to collegians who are like, oh gosh, what do you do when you graduate? And I was like, I got you. Like I've never lived in the same place as my best friend.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, tell us a little bit about, I mean, you've already hinted a little bit about the importance of relationships for you, but how do you describe your values or your meaning and purpose? I think people think about those concepts in different ways, but you get the gist. Like, tell us about what's important to you today, how you think about that.
I think that with some of the most recent current events, I've really thought a lot about that. And I think what I am coming to maybe understand more about myself these days is that purpose and meaning for me will always kind of fall into the category of, like, have I done everything I can that's reasonable to achieve the outcome that I desire? And that can be in any facet of my life, in my personal relationships, in my professional relationships, in my work, in my civic engagement, in my volunteer opportunities. I think that I just always want to feel like I have done what I could, so that I don't ever have this concept of feeling regret later. Like I don't want to ever feel like, oh God, I could have done more. I could have written one more postcard. I could have reached out one more time to that person. And so that's really been kind of where I've been living more recently, just in this idea of, like, okay, when I'm thinking through the things that are important to me or the decisions I need to make, have I done everything? And again, I want to be reasonable. Balance is important. There's no need to, like, we're not trying to tell people to stay up all night. but have I done everything reasonably that I could to affect the outcome?
How do you balance that? Because there are so many needs in the world. You want to be a good mom. So have you done everything you can? Some work project, have you done everything you can that's reasonable? So how do you choose between the different things calling to your attention, all of the needs of the world, like where you're going to put that time?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I wish that I had an amazing answer.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think sometimes it's circumstance.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just a matter of the circumstance of our lives, right? Like if something happens and I, need to be hyper focused on my family, then that's where I am in those moments. And I think I would like to say that I give myself a lot of grace. That's not really true. I don't. I
Yeah.
think I'm probably harder on myself than anyone would ever be harder on me. But I really am trying pretty hard day to day, and I'm great at giving this advice. I'm not as great at taking it. Of um, kind of when I have that moment, generally towards the end of the day, sometimes it's in the middle of the day, where I'm feeling like, oof, gosh, so much, right?
Yeah.
I try to remind myself, you are enough and you have done enough. So
Yes.
just really trying to tap into this idea that like even when I feel like I'm not doing enough or I'm my attention is split in too many directions, that I am enough. I'm one person. I can only do so much in any given day, and that I have done enough for that moment, for that day, for that project, kind of
Yeah.
fill in the blank there. And, I've started to do this thing that I hadn't done before. This is super new, so I don't know how it's going to really pan out in the end. But I'm great at like calendaring my work stuff. I'm really great at calendaring my like personal sort of family stuff. And I hadn't really been calendaring my like volunteer stuff. Like I'd been
Mm.
like, sure, if it was like a meeting or if I was like moderating a panel, but I hadn't really been tracking like how much time are you spending emailing back and forth? How much time are you spending like researching that thing that somebody asked you about, right? And so
Hmm.
just trying to be thoughtful about where I'm spending my time and really evaluating whether I feel like I am being served by those volunteer opportunities. And the
Yeah.
bigger ones are super easy, and those are easy
Yeah.
for me to be able to go yes or no. It's sometimes it's those more discreet, like, hey, can you be an evaluator for fill in the blank, right? And so I'm
Yeah.
reading whatever and scoring things that I'm really trying to be a little bit more thoughtful about how I'm giving that time away.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I thought about something while you were talking that I haven't thought about in a long time. I had a friend who emailed our group of girlfriends, like back when our kids were little, and it was a question about, kind of like keeping things in perspective. And I remember sort of tapping in or tuning into this idea that I had to listen to my gut and my intuition a little bit more. Like
Mm.
it was a question about balance. It was how do you keep it all in balance? And it's what you spoke to alluded to it. Like you're working on one thing, but your gut, your voice, starts to tell you, okay, that's enough. We need to shift gears and give our attention to something else that is also important, more important, whatever. And I
Yeah.
think as I imagine that there are some students listening to us talk, I think that that idea of kind of intuition and instinct, like there's no framework, there's no map, there's no, even if you calendar it perfectly after deciding I will give X% to this and X% to that, you will have this voice that says you're needed here or you're needed somewhere else. And
Mm-hmm.
it shifts over time
Mm-hmm.
and you just get pulled over here. And then you're like, all right, now I'm pulled over here. Interesting.
Yeah, I have really leaned into timers and alarms, which
Yes.
I don't know that I would have thought I would have been that person, but it helps. Like even sometimes if I'm just like overwhelmed with whatever, right? I
Yeah.
could look in the space that I'm in right now and I'm like, I have clothes I need to fold. Like sometimes I just set a timer for 15 minutes and I'm like, you're gonna fold clothes for 15 minutes. And when the
Yes.
timer goes off, you can be done folding clothes for now. Like, right? Like
Yes.
just chip away at it however you can and try not to have this overwhelming, like I must do all of it right now, because I do think that very much is how I think people who are high achievers tend to function sometimes, is you've got to
Yes.
like do the whole thing. I do think law school taught me a little bit about that though. Like there's really nothing in law school that you see the end of anytime soon. Like it's 100% a like marathon. Like all of it is a marathon, right?
All of it.
Yeah. And so I I started baking a lot in law school, and I
Uh-huh.
realized that a big piece of that was that I didn't have to think. I just followed the instructions. So it was great. I could just be like, boom, 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 you do these things. And then at the end, I had an outcome. Like I had a complete project.
Yes.
It was like, oh, and look, you baked it and it's done. And so sometimes having those little timers sort of check that box for me where it's like, oh, see, you did it for 15 minutes. Great. Right. Like I can be like, you've crossed that off your list. But I also use them for self-care. So every day at 3 o'clock, a timer goes off, an alarm goes off for me, and it says the title of it is, did you move your body today? And that's
Yes.
all it says. And so if
Yes.
I have not made an effort yet that day to go on a walk or do a little yoga or stretch or whatever, then that is my cue to myself that like I owe it to myself to go move my body as you're able, right? Move your to
Yeah.
whatever makes
Yeah.
sense for you. If you're someone who's like, I love singing every day, then maybe your timer is,
Yeah.
did you sing today? Right? Like
Yeah.
give yourself 15 minutes to do a thing for you in that moment.
That's so funny. 3 o'clock is my reminder time for the same
Is
thing.
it?
Like,
That's great.
there's something magical about that time. Like, you've had enough time to have accomplished some things
Yep.
from a work perspective. And if you take a quick break, you still have some
Yep.
time to come back and get a couple
Yep.
more things done. Um, and it's not close enough to the end of the day that you're like, all right, I'm out of here. So, well, tell me what you remember about how you thought about meaning and purpose. And I think this is like a two-part question. It's like, what were your values while you were at
Mm.
Butler? And did you think intentionally about them?
When I was, 18, 19, and 20, what I really look back and think about, all I wanted to kind of do was help kids. That was like really my mindset. Now, what's
Mhm.
fascinating about that is if you had talked to anyone who knew me, my extended family, they all would have told you Stacie's going to be a lawyer. I
Awesome.
went into school thinking I'm going to go be a pediatric oncologist. So I started Butler as a biology and French major, wanting to be pre-med, wanting to go to med school and be a pediatric oncologist. And I learned pretty quickly that like I'm fascinated by the human body, but I don't really want to touch other people's human bodies. So like I was like, that's not my jam. Like I'll give you a hug all day, but like the rest of it, I was like, that's fine. Um, and so really shifted and didn't really expect that law school was what I was going to end up doing with my life. That's not even, I mean, I just at that point kind of got my French degree because I was like 4 and out. I don't want to be in school any longer than I have to be.
Yes.
So I don't know that I really had thought about it a lot at that time. But what's so interesting is I'm a bit of a nostalgia hoarder. I mean, I try to do it in small amounts. I We had to write a letter to ourselves. So I was an RA, and my first year as an RA, we wrote this like letter to ourselves where we talked about, what was our goal in being an RA? What did we want to do? What was our sort of goal for our unit? Um, and in that, and then I think at semester we opened them to be like, do you feel like you've achieved your goal? If not, like what will you do differently in the next semester?
Yeah.
And when I opened that letter, the phrase that I wrote, paraphrasing here, was something like, I want to create an environment where my residents feel safe to achieve their goals and get the education that they desire, which is wild to me now because I
Yeah.
feel like 19-year-old Stacie like was prophetic in a way that she didn't know, because now I really have learned that so much about what I love to do and what I think is incredibly important to me is helping people be successful however they define that.
Yes.
Um, and I think that that's always been a little bit of the root of where I've been coming from. Like I always wanted to help kids, and I don't know that I had the ability to define that as like, I want them to be able to live the lives that they want to live. And so how can I do that? And in different phases of my life, that's shown up differently. Like sometimes it's been helping them do something they didn't think they'd be able to do, like spend the night away from home at a camp.
Mhm.
Um, or helping a kid overcome something like cancer, which is where I was really focused on for a long time. And so I think kind of as I continue to grow in myself and in my career, I really find that like I want to be that rising tide, right? I think that
Yeah.
concept that rising tides raise all ships. Like I want to raise all ships how they want to be raised, as high as they want to go. as far out into the ocean as they want to be. And that's important to me, that I'm not defining what success is for other people, but that they get to define it for themselves, and that I
Yeah.
just get to be a tiny part of helping them get there.
I think that's so beautiful. And, I think there are lots of people who would say that they want to help other people achieve success, but I love your clarity about how success has different meanings to different people, and helping people figure out what that is a purpose and a, value all on its own. So that's really awesome. What you envisioned for yourself at 19 is different than where you are today. What are some of those key kind of moments or milestones that shifted that along the way?
So I think primarily I could think of like two sort of really big things. I have been I'm always risk adverse. I have been my whole life. I don't like to put myself out there in the world. The idea
Yeah.
of being rejected seems really scary. Less so now that I'm older, really scary for me, as a younger person. And some of
Hmm.
that's just like family stuff, right? Like you understand that the history of your life impacts kind of where you are in those moments.
Yeah.
Um, but I think a couple of big pieces for me were, I had this amazing job. I worked for Illinois Legal Aid Online, which sounds wild, but I worked for basically an online like legal aid organization.
Yeah.
Um, and part of my job in that, I was the outreach coordinator. Part of my role was to travel around the entire state of Illinois and open what we were calling legal self-help centers. So trying to make the law accessible to everyone. So understanding that, like, right, people don't generally come to court for positive things. The most positive things are generally like adoption, right? If you are, in the middle of dissolving a relationship legally, you had to be in like a not so great relationship before you got it dissolved. You may be happy about the dissolution there. You may be receiving a judgment from
Hmm.
a personal injury that, like, gosh, but you had to be injured before you got the judgment, right? So people aren't usually happy about going to court, and we don't have many resources for people who are in civil court. And so being able to travel around the state to pull together stakeholders from across those individual counties, librarians, judges, the local bar, schools, colleges, if they were in those counties, and say, what can we do to help people tell their story in a meaningful way? Right? How can we
Hmm.
help them have the language, understand the rules of this silly room where someone sits at the front of it,
Yeah.
and like they're the lord of their fiefdom in that room, and help them understand how they can comply enough to be able to feel like they can tell their story in a meaningful way, because so many people are shut down because they just don't know the rules, right?
Yes. Yeah.
um and I think that was such a turning point for me, and that I had not really, I think, understood, processed, or really internalized how important it is for people to be able to communicate in a way that others can receive that communication. And that's
Hmm.
really all it was. It's probably when I really started to lean into and understand kind of my philosophy on being a lawyer, my philosophy on the law, how I feel about sort of the strictures of our legal system, things like that.
Yeah.
Um, I definitely think a major turning point for me in my life was having kids.
Hmm.
So I had my first child in 2014. So I was terrified um, of having a Black boy. I was
Yeah.
just terrified. I was like, this
Yeah.
country is not kind to Black men. This is going to be really hard. And I got pregnant with my son. We found out that he was a boy. And then Ferguson happened. And I was
Mm.
like, oh, great, here we go.
Yeah. Right.
And was just just terrified. And, I have this kid who is the most kind and gentle and empathetic person that I have probably ever met.
Mm.
And he's built like his father. His father played collegiate football, right? Like
Yeah.
he is 10 and he looks 15, like he's already up to my shoulder. And
Yeah.
he is just the least threatening human you will ever meet in your entire life. And he is going to appear to be threatening to so many people. And so
Yeah.
I think that solidified again for me, just continued to solidify this idea that I was like, I want people to be able to tell their story in a meaningful way. Like, I want him to be able to define his life for himself. They will look at him and think that he is this scary, threatening human, and like he's absolutely not. Like, he's, don't you
Hmm.
dare shed a tear. I was having a tough morning and I was crying, and he was making pancakes for the family, and he made me a pancake with a smiley face, and he said, I made you the smiley face pancake because you were crying earlier and I knew you were upset. And I was like, you were just the sweetest kid in the
That's
whole
so
world.
sweet.
Right. So
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I want him to have that ability. And I think that really
Yeah.
made a difference for me. I think those, like, professionally, this concept of really understanding how the law functioned outside of major cities and big big worlds where there are lots of attorneys and access and money,
Mhm.
and then watching and helping raise these kids that don't have an ability to tell their story to strangers,
Mhm.
right? They are always
Mhm.
going to be judged on the way that they look or the way that they are perceived by others, has really continued to solidify, I think, for me, this idea that, going back to, like, how do you define success for yourself? How do I help you be successful the way you want it to be? How do we help people tell their stories in a way that they can be best received by the people that need to receive them in the moments that that needs to happen to?
Yeah. I love the idea of thinking about what, we want for our own kids and making sure that we're being intentional about helping other people's children, have the same thing. What about, well, I'm curious. I want to come back to the question of, since you started thinking pediatric oncology, when did the shift to law school happen?
I had been working in higher education. I was working in residence life. I was running residence halls for Earlham College. And I was on a 10-month contract. So I always had these sort of 2 months off in the summer.
Yeah.
And I had gone back to the camp that I had gone to because I was like, hey, I got nothing to do for 2 months. Like,
Mm-hmm.
y'all just want an experienced counselor to hang out with here. And they're like, sure,
Yeah.
come on over. And we had gone to Blockbuster. We were like buying DVDs or whatever. And I bought the DVD Hotel Rwanda. And I'd never seen the movie, but I was like, oh, I really want to see this. And it's on sale. I'm going to buy it. And that summer I watched Hotel Rwanda, and again, just like watched this genocide and the story of how one person, worked really hard to help preserve essentially an entire culture,
Yeah.
and how, again, I think, going back to these things that I now look back on my life and understand about myself, right? Like, how are we going to allow these people to be successful after this? How are we going to help them survive this? Um, and that was sort of the moment for me that I kind of went, I think I need this additional education.
Yeah.
And I just never really had the desire to be a traditional lawyer. I
Mm-hmm.
never saw myself at a big firm. I never saw myself really even litigating that much, even
Mm-hmm.
though there are lots of people who are like, but you're good at it. And I was like, just because I'm good in a courtroom doesn't mean I like it. Like, I don't,
Yeah.
which I think, honestly, as a woman and be a woman of color, the fact that, I mean, even I was young, right? Like, I mean, I graduated from law school at 27, and I remember people really wanting to push me into that, and me being like, I don't really think that that's for me. I don't really like that. And
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
shocked that I had the ability to say no, that I wasn't
Yeah.
like, hey, we want you to be successful in this way. And I was like, okay, like, I think it's so easy to just say yes
Mm-hmm.
to those things.
Yeah.
But I really knew that I wanted to help people who needed the help.
Yeah.
And didn't have the resources to seek things in other ways. And so I've always sort of lived in this world of, like, I want this education and I want the ability to do these things. And sometimes having those letters after your name help grant you access to
True.
places.
Yep.
But I've never worked at a big firm. I have never, I shouldn't say never, for a very short period of time, I worked in private practice, but I have
Yeah.
almost always either been in-house or working for legal aid or working at, like, a nonprofit like I am now in-house. So
Yeah.
really just wanting to get the education and to get those. Sometimes you need the letters. And in this
Yep.
case, I think I
Yep.
knew that I needed the letters to help grant me some access.
Awesome. Do you have any practices or habits or rituals that keep you grounded and centered on what's important to you?
There are two things that I do there, and they feel very different, but they're kind of not. I love to run.
Mhm.
I'm not fast, but I love that. For me, running is a way to kind of honor my body and to remind myself of all the things I'm capable of doing. Like,
Yeah.
running, I think, is almost more mental than it is physical, right? Like, just to
Hmm.
say keep going, but one step in front of the other. I think it's a great, for me, it's a great, like, just honoring my resiliency too. I am a really big fan of, and I think anyone who's worked with me or reported to me knows that I'm the first person to open my door to, like, do you want to dance it out? Like, what do we need to do? Do we need to have a quick, do we need a quick, like, what are you feeling? Do we need to like rage dance? Do we need to like celebratory dance? Like, you tell me
Yes.
what we need in this moment. Um, but I am such a fan of just like turning the music up louder than it needs to be and just having whatever that moment is that I need. And sometimes it's after a really challenging meeting at work. Like it, you will find me living in some great 90s like ska and punk, like just being like, that was so annoying. And just really like letting it out in that way so I can go back to doing the thing that I need to maybe do for the rest of the day. I dancing to celebrate. Sometimes I cry, like I just am sad and I'm allowed to sort of live in those music. So I find a lot of value for me personally in moving my body in music and just letting the music either dictate maybe how I want to feel. Sometimes it's about where do I want to be in the next 5 to 10 minutes, and
Yes.
sometimes it's about I need to express what I'm feeling right now so that I can move through it and maybe like get to the other side of it so I can
Yeah.
finish whatever it is I need to do in that day. So I think those are the
Oh,
two
that's
things that for
awesome.
me bring me back.
Yes. Um, you've been working remotely. I was just envisioning myself turning the music really loud at my office and
I've done it.
dancing.
I will say I have been known for what we lovingly call 90s R&B Fridays. So I am known for opening, like, everybody open your doors if you want to be a part of it, and we'll like put a
Yes.
little speaker out there, and we just like I think that work is work, but it's
Yeah.
not, it doesn't define us, and it's not who we are, and it shouldn't be who we are. It shouldn't be our
Right.
identities.
Yes.
Um, and I really, as much as I have valued the work that I've done and that I've been thoughtful about where I work,
Yeah.
um, also work is a transaction. We provide a service and they provide us with pay. And
Yeah.
my hope for, I think, current college students too is to just to hold that a little bit. I don't, my goal is not to tell you to not be passionate about what you're doing or not
Mm-hmm.
to care about what you're doing. But at the end of the day, like, the organization that I work for, in name as the organization, does not care about me, Stacie, right? The
Mm-hmm.
people there may care about me, but
Yes.
my job doesn't care about me, right? My job wants me to do it and to do it well, and then we're
Yep.
going to move on. And so it's really about sort of holding on to that sometimes too. When I feel like I'm getting a little mired, is to remind myself that I'm like, this is not who I am. This is what I do today. And that can change. That can change. I can choose to
Yeah.
do something different tomorrow. I can choose to work in another place. I can maybe choose to make a career change, right? Like, all of those things are true. We do have that freedom. We are lucky to have that freedom in this country right now to be able to do some of those things. And I recognize the privilege involved in that as well. But like, it doesn't, it's not who you are. It just isn't. It's not who I am. No one's gonna be like, she was a great lawyer when I die, right? Like, that's not
Right.
what I want them to say
Right.
about me. I don't want
Right.
them to say she was a great lawyer. I want them to say she was a kind person. She gave great pep talks. She
Mm-hmm.
helped me feel like I could do anything. Like, those are the things I want people to say about me. I don't care if they say that I won every case I ever litigated. That will never be important to me. So,
Yeah, that's awesome. That feels like a really good place to wrap, but I want to make sure I give you a chance. Is there anything I didn't ask you as as you had reflected and prepared? Is there anything you haven't had a chance to share that you want to share?
nothing that I haven't shared, but something that I
Yeah.
will repeat that I have
Yeah.
really worked hard to say, like, at the end of every kind of talk I do, is just like, you're enough and you've done enough
Yeah.
for today. So
Oh,
give yourself a break.
perfect. I'm going to end up re-listening to this one over and over just for that message, I think. Well, thank you for sharing your wisdom. I know that there are students and hopefully others who will be listening and will reflect on what you've shared and learn and grow as a result of it. You will bring them closer to their own versions of success. And I just appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thank you. It's been great.
Yeah, absolutely.